Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. This is our fourth webinar as part of a COVID-19 series, and the name of it is Building Wellness in the Age of COVID-19. So a few things before we get started. My name is Laura Nee. I will be your host for the webinar. I've been involved with the engineering and construction industry for over 20 years, and I'll do a little bit of introduction as far as our company is concerned. As far as logistics, this is an informational webinar. It is being recorded, so by registering, you will have access to it. You are in listen-only mode as a participant, so we ask that you ask questions by typing in the Q&A feature of Zoom. So we will answer questions along the way with time permitting. We will also have a Q&A session at the end, again with time permitting, but I encourage you to make this as interactive as a meeting as possible and ask questions as they come up, and we'll interject them at some point throughout the presentation. So we'll go through some introductions to our guest speaker as well, Eric Booth. And in case you have missed any of their other webinars, they are available on our website. We had a webinar on scheduling after COVID. This is kind of our way of giving back and helping companies deal with COVID-19. So we've had 3 other previous webinars. First one was built on scheduling and how you can incorporate COVID delays into your schedule. The second one was about contract management and how you can build contingencies into your contracts, in your construction contracts. And then the third one is we had a panelist discussion with a couple of our customers as to how the COVID delay affected the job sites and how the job sites have really changed in the construction industry. So again, please feel free to ask questions through the chat feature, and we'll go ahead and get started. Just to give you a background as to my company, the Simplex Group, we have been in business for over 35 years. We got our start as a Primavera reseller. So if you're involved with the engineering and construction industry, you may be familiar with Primavera, which is now an Oracle product. But having resold the Primavera applications, we got a lot of experience and exposure to companies in the engineering and construction world, primarily scheduling, but also some other contract type management products like expedition and contract management. And in 2008, we were working on a specific project local to the Pittsburgh area, a Union 10 hospital renovation project with a company, a construction management firm who was looking to streamline the RFI and submittal process with the multiple primes working on their projects. And so we tried to accomplish that with Primavera, but it really wasn't the right fit. It wasn't a collaborative solution, which this client was really looking for. So we tested out a different technology from Microsoft, specifically SharePoint, and realized that that was a really good tool and platform to develop a construction project management system on. So after that, we developed more and more best practices and features and functionality based on our clients' requirements, and offer it now through the Microsoft Office or Microsoft 365 platform. Today, we continue to work with a variety of different customers in different industries. So we support owners, construction management firms, designers, and contractors, and encourage everybody to use a common project management system to collaborate and process, review, and approvals of construction type documents. This gives you just a view into some of our clients that we've had the really luxury experience to working with. And again, from a lot of different types of perspectives, owners, construction management firms, and some contractors as well. But today, I would like to kick off. We're really excited about this webinar. Eric Booth is going to be our presenter. He is president of Desmone Architects. And he, like us, has really given back to the community in trying to prepare companies to improve their workspaces and offer different ways and techniques to improve workspaces. So we're very much interested in hearing, Eric, what you have to say on that. I've been a participant on other webinars. Eric is certainly doing a good job presenting in different audiences and has a lot of experience to bring to the table, especially because Eric has actually gotten certification, Well Gold certification, actually before COVID in March of 2020, in their own headquarters, which is a very unique workspace. So they were the first private office to receive the certification in Western Pennsylvania. So having gone through that process, Eric has a lot of experience to share with you. Desmone Architects has been in business for over 60 years. So they, as a company, have a lot of experience working and designing workspaces, but also a lot of other types of facilities, from civic, community, education, healthcare, single family, multifamily, religious, and retail facilities. And they have over 40 employees across offices in Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland. So Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us to educate us on the workspace as we will know it in the future, if not today.
Sure.
So before we get started, if you've attended any of our webinars in the past, I always like to start with a poll question. So the poll question that we have here today to start with is, where are you primarily working from? Because a lot of businesses have shut down their office spaces to prepare for COVID or to really just make it safer for their employees. So a lot of people I know are forced to work from home. But some companies and businesses are allowing employees to come back and work in the office too. So it would be interesting to know where people are working from today. So I will go ahead and end the polling and share the results with everybody on the call. So actually it looks like a good mix of home and office for people on the call, and a little bit of both. So very interesting. So we'll have a couple of more poll questions as we go throughout the presentation. So with that, I will have Eric go ahead and present your screen and walk us through your presentation.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Glad to be here. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is a subject I really like to talk about. I think it's very relevant. It's going to be relevant to us all. It was relevant before COVID, but now that we've experienced this really upheaval, the quality of our space and our awareness of our surroundings and our environment have become really important. So I'm glad to talk today about things, and my hope is to kind of give a little bit of knowledge and to kind of increase awareness that we all have of our spaces. So I'll be talking specifically about the WELL certification, which Laura mentioned. It's a kind of a subset. It's a way of achieving wellness in buildings, but really the purpose of this is to think more broadly about what wellness means in buildings and spaces. And because it's something that we can all incorporate to some level. And so if you have any takeaways out of this, I want you to be aware of your spaces and think about the things you can do, whether through design or even just interacting with it, to actually improve your space such that it actually increases wellness. So this is a quote from Winston Churchill, which we think is very relevant here at Desmone. We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And in fact, we believe so strongly about this saying that we actually had it inscribed on our building. So what you're looking at here is the existing building to the left. So any of you who are from Pittsburgh would know Doughboy Square. That was our old bank building. And we put an addition on. And this addition that's kind of in the center right here is the one that we got certification for. And so if you're having trouble seeing it, it's on the frieze. It's right there. I guess it's kind of the analogous of an architectural tattoo in a sense. But it's very important to us, and it really kind of sort of paints a picture of how we look at things and how we look at buildings. So to kind of get into this, I want everyone, if you will, to take a moment to consider the space that you're in right now. Now, Laura said, through the poll that half are home and half are at the office, perhaps. But I want you to think about this. Be mindful of what's around you. So what do you see? What do you hear? What can you touch? For example, you're probably sitting in a chair, right? What can you smell? Taste? How do you feel right now? I want you to think about that in the space that you're currently in. And I want you to consider these. So in the space that you're currently in, what if the lights were significantly brighter than they are right now? How would that affect things? Or what if a dog was barking loudly? So for those who work at home, and for me, I work at home occasionally, this is something that really kind of affects me. What if the space was 15 degrees colder or warmer? What if you smelled smoke? And what if you had, or in some cases did not have, a cup of coffee? How would that affect your interpretation of your space right now? Now, how about these other factors? So what if you didn't sleep well last night? Do you think that would affect your ability to work in the space that you're in right now? Or what if you just had an argument with a coworker or a spouse? Or what if you haven't eaten in the last 12 hours? Would that affect your ability to work in your space? Or what if you found out that a loved one had just passed away, or there was some other news that you got that really affected your mind? Now imagine being in this space right here. So this is the Pantheon. This is one of my favorite spaces in the world, but clearly one that has a lot of impact for those that have been in it. And then now imagine being in this one. I think some of you may be in spaces like this right now. For those who don't recognize it, this is the office in the movie Office Space. And it's very typical of a lot of our spaces over the last many years. The point is that space matters. Our environment, the buildings we have, the spaces that we inhabit really affect how we operate and how we see and how we feel. So we're gonna do a little poll now.
Yes.
Are you comfortable in the space that you work in?
I have launched it now. And this could include, you know, your office or your home, truly. I'm sure there's a lot that you can improve about anywhere that you work.
Right.
I know I have meetings sometimes in cars.
Right.
The new world we live in. All right, we'll give it a moment here. Okay. Well, the good news is that people are pretty comfortable in the place that they work in. So, but there are some that are not.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm going to be sharing a lot of information from the International Well Building Institute, and a little bit later I'll talk about what that is and why it's relevant. But one of these statistics that comes up often is this idea that we spend approximately 90% of our time indoors. So obviously our environment is the largest determinant of our overall health. It wasn't always this way. I mean, depending on what career you work in or what profession, you may be outside more. But most of us who have traditional jobs at this point spend most of our times indoors, some kind. So what determines the state of health? This is from the Well Building Institute, references information from the CDC. And you see that the largest portion is our physical and social environment. Also, our lifestyle and habits and health habits affect this, behaviors, medical care and genes. Sorry. And it's these things right here that really design and culture, and I mean culture in the case of like an office, it'd be an office culture or just however we sort of decide to occupy spaces. These are the things that design and culture can influence. But the key word here is influence. Despite what a lot of us architects would really love to have, the ability to control people through our designs, we can't. The best we can do is influence people. But we can have a very, very strong influence on people depending on the spaces we create, the policies we have, and the things we promote within the spaces themselves. So I'm going to use WELL as a framework. Again, I'm going to mention a little more about WELL later. I don't want to get into it yet because I want you to think this broadly about these different factors that affect our space and us. And so these are 10 categories that WELL is organized in. And I'm going to go through each of these things individually, and I'll touch on some more than others. But these are kind of a framework of the overall types of things, at least from a design and building perspective, that we think about with respect to how our work and our spaces affect us. And if some of these look pretty obvious, like air and water and light, that's intentional because these things may be broad categories, but they have a tremendous influence on the way that we operate in the space that we're in. So we talk about air. Air is really relevant. It's gained a lot of, obviously, attention through COVID because of the transmission of pathogens and the transmission of COVID. But this is kind of a broad area. And what it incorporates or encompasses is, in the case of buildings, ventilation, inoperable windows, filtration, smoking ban, maintenance and operations, which are very important, microbe, mold control, and construction pollution management. For those of you who are contractors, this is the aspect of construction, obviously, in terms of being able to control or have an effect on the air quality during those times. Now, obviously, these things have a huge impact on our buildings. We've been hearing a lot about ventilation and operable windows as a way of sort of flushing spaces and filtration. Obviously, filtration is the ability to extract contaminants from the air. And so here's a diagram, for example, of the way that this has been sort of thought about more recently in COVID. What you're seeing here is a diagram of a traditional or typical mechanical system or air handler. And what you see in red are these things that are things that we can look at now to specifically address the spread of pathogens. So high quality filters, UV lights that are throughout the system as ways of kind of being able to control the quality of the air itself from within the space. We also have water. So when we talk about water, there's moisture management in terms of keeping water outside the building, obviously, but also access to high quality water. Water obviously is an incredibly important, vital part of our existence. And so our buildings and our spaces and our policies can be such that we actually promote, for example, access to high quality water and drinking water promotion. So the idea of drinking water promotion is that we have spaces and we have policies and we have a culture that encourages people to drink water. Legionella control, this would be similar, this could also be similar to any pathogen that would be waterborne. Water treatment, obviously, when we're able to treat water, have healthier water for us, it obviously is going to affect our health. And hand washing. So hand washing, again, through COVID, very, very important part as a way of trying to reduce the spread of disease. Nourishment. So this may not be something that becomes obvious when we talk about buildings, but it's actually very relevant because we're thinking here about broadly, holistically, the things that affect human health. Obviously, the things that we put in our bodies is incredibly important. And so buildings and spaces and policies can actually help to promote or hurt this. So for example, our spaces and our policies can encourage better eating habits, encouraging more fruits, consumption of fruits and vegetables, portion management. Nutritional transparency is basically saying that whenever we're providing food in our spaces, that we're transparent about what the ingredients are within them. Mindful eating spaces, and I'll show a picture of what this could be. Food preparation guidelines, production and sourcing. These are all things that are affected by the operation of our buildings that obviously have a very huge direct impact on health. And so, for example, this is a way that this can kind of be fleshed out in terms of architectural space. So what you're looking at is actually a shot of our cafe, and this was part of our addition, our renovation that we did. And the idea here, and obviously you can see this was pre-COVID because no one's wearing masks, but the idea of creating spaces that encourage at the time communal eating and also to encourage mindful eating. So space you can go and be very aware of what you're putting in your body.
Eric, how many businesses do you think or percentage of businesses actually incorporate cafes into their workspace?
The larger ones are a very large portion include at least some bit. So most would include at least a break room, but all large offices have been working those in some way. So
I know that's also a concern with opening up office spaces and how to deal with the cafes that people would be eating at. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's created a conundrum. And so to the point, when I'm talking about wellness here, wellness is a much broader sense. So COVID has sort of forced us to go into triage mode in terms of stopping pathogens. But we got to think about more broadly, and especially as we move through COVID, as to the spaces and the moves we make to encourage a broader sort of sense of wellness.
Thank you.
Light's critical. So daylight and lighting systems have a huge effect on our overall health. The idea that we promote sleep, if we think about the things that impact our health, sleep, diet, movement or exercise, it all starts with sleep. And so light and the use of light can actually help to promote or discourage our sleeping habits. So for those of you who have iPhones or phones that have a night mode, you'll notice that it goes to a warmer color. There's a reason for that, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. So occupancy controls, this basically has to do with automatic sensors within spaces that turn lights on or off. Circadian lighting design, I'll touch on this on the next slide here, what that means. Glare control, if we're in a space and there's a lot of glare on our screens or within our space, that has a huge effect on the ability for us to do our work properly. Access to daylight, ultimately, we're creatures and we have a very strong affinity for natural light. And so being able to provide access to natural light and daylight actually has been shown to increase our moods and productivity. And obviously visual balance and light quality within space. And these are all things that we can design lighting systems in order to be able to accommodate. So this is a diagram right here, and what you're seeing is the position of the sun. And so if you've ever sort of went out in the morning or in the evening, you'll notice that the sun in the sky has a lot warmer tone to it. And then what happens is through the day, into the middle of the day, and here at noon, when the sun is at the highest, the overall color is much more of a higher color temperature and it's much more blue. And so circadian lighting, so our bodies have actually become used to this, whether we realize it or not. It's kind of a subconscious thing. And so the concept goes is that if we design a lighting system to mimic, or at least to basically be able to reproduce this kind of rhythm within our spaces, the idea is that it actually will help our sleeping patterns. When these things are disrupted, our sleeping patterns are disrupted. And when our sleeping patterns are disrupted, obviously it affects the way that we're able to do our work. And so the concept goes is that if through our lighting systems, we can encourage circadian lighting and we can encourage better sleep patterns, then when our employees come in the next day, better rested, they're more likely to do a better job. Movement. So movement is about promoting active living, moving around. Obviously being stationary for any amount of time, as a lot of us have had to do with workstations, has not been very good for our health in terms of joints and so forth, and even just basically, gaining weight by the fact we're not moving around. So our spaces and our policies can actually help to promote this. So ergonomics just basically refers to the comfort level of things that we sit on, that we use, our desks, for example, our seats, the seat you're sitting in right now. That seat is affecting your posture, and your posture is affecting your health. And then because of that, it's also going to affect your ability to do your job properly. Active furnishings, these refer to things that can be moved around and encourage different kind of positions for working. For example, sit to stand desks, movement circulation through the space. I'll talk about this in a bit on the next slide. Active commuting. The idea that we encourage people to do bike riding or walking instead of taking cars. Physical activity, space, and promotion. So this could take the form of gyms and so forth, or even just a promotion of physical activity within a space. And self-monitoring, these are things like Fitbits and so forth. The idea being that if you're more aware of what your body is and is not doing, you're more likely to do something about it. So one way we can do this in architecture is through the use of space and use of elements. So what you're looking at here on the left side is a photo of our new stair. And we designed the stair in such a way to actually promote people using it. So it has a lot of natural light. It actually has an art installation in the middle there that's based on sort of a celestial theme. With the idea being that if you create spaces that are much nicer to be in, or if the stair is more convenient, if you take the stair as opposed to the elevator, you're going to get at least a little bit more calories burned than you would, for example, if you're taking the elevator. Thermal comfort. This is one that we're all acutely aware of, whether we realize it or not. So the idea that we're going to maximize productivity through HVAC design. HVAC just stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It's your furnace, it's your air conditioner, your ventilation system. Having different thermal zones. So you've probably been in a big space where it's cold on one area and hot in another area. And so the idea of creating thermal zones within a space is to be able to control temperature and humidity and the comfort level essentially within smaller areas of those spaces. So you don't have to have one big area, for example. Individual controls as much as possible. There have been studies shown that when people feel like they have the ability to control the temperature in their space, they tend to feel better. And for those of us that done school design, we used to actually, a little tip, we used to put in thermostats in some of the rooms, and they seemed functional, but they were not. But the fact that people thought that they can actually adjust the temperature actually showed to increase satisfaction with the space, seriously. Ongoing monitoring, this is basically tracking air quality and also going to be the temperature, humidity within the space, and humidity control, so the amount of moisture within the space. You notice that in the winter when things get very dry, your hands start to crack. Obviously, when that happens, it affects our health and it affects our comfort, which in turn affects our ability to function within our space. Sound. For anyone who's worked in an open office, understand this is a very important thing. So the idea of sound is that we improve our experience with optimal acoustics, Sound mapping, this is essentially determining where in spaces sounds occur and where they can be controlled. Sound barriers, literally things that stop the transmission of sound from one space to another. So this could take the form of a wall. It could take the form of any other kind of barrier, ceilings, for example. Absorption, these are using materials within a space to absorb sound so it doesn't travel to other places or reverberate. And then when all else fails, sound masking. So sound masking is this idea that when it just basically works through the concept of distraction. And so what you're seeing here is a little diagram. And the one side, you see there's a sink without the water on. And if you've been in a situation and say your son or daughter says something, you can hear that. But when the sink is running and there is additional sound in that space, you'll notice that you may hear something, but it's muffled. And essentially, sound masking systems work the same way. They introduce sound into a space and essentially help to create distraction. So this diagram here at the bottom, on the left side with that big red circle, that would be sort of the normal radius of distraction, as it were, without sound masking. And then on the right side would be the radius of distraction with sound masking, because there's additional ambient sound and sound pressure within the space. Materials. So by using materials, we can reduce exposure to hazardous materials. Literally, some materials have chemicals that can be very, very harmful to our bodies. In terms of VOCs, you have on here the volatile organic compounds. Reducing those again to basically create healthier spaces. Waste management, being able to get rid of waste from our spaces. Pesticide use or the lack thereof. Pesticides have been shown to have a tremendous effect on people's health. Very, very important one now through COVID, cleaning products and protocol. And so obviously, the cleaner the spaces that we have, the healthier they're going to be. And there's also kind of an overall kind of concept here that there's also a perception that cleaner spaces also help to kind of create a better sense of security. Long-term emission control, this would be basically for those chemicals to make sure that the things that we're speccing and providing are not emitting things long-term. And then site remediation, this actually refers to a large-scale site, a job site where we're removing, say, lead or other kind of organic or even organic compounds from a space or a site in order to basically reduce leaching and so forth later. Mind. So the idea here is that we do things through policy or space to support cognitive emotional health. So one of the most obvious things and the most direct things is access to nature. This could be visual access to nature or actual access to nature. So of course, through COVID, we're all cooped up in our houses, right, or our spaces. And what have we all been trying to be able to do? We try to get outside. We get outside because we don't want to be inside. Why would we want to be outside? Because essentially, we are still have a very close affinity to nature as human beings. And it has been shown that when we have access to nature, even visually or actually physically, it helps to actually help with our health and our well-being. Focus support, sleep support, I mentioned before, having policies that affect sleeping habits. Tobacco prevention and cessation, obviously, smoking is very bad for us. And so if we can do less of that or have policies that prevent that or at least discourage it, the idea is that we can have healthier people. So for example, one form that this takes is that in our building, we have a 25-foot smoking ban outside all of our doors. And obviously we have a smoking ban indoors also. And then substance use education and service, this is going to be through policy, not necessarily the space itself. Community, the last one here. The idea here is that we create inclusive, integrated communities. And this gets to the broader concept about how buildings impact we as human beings. But the idea of creating or promoting community immunity, supporting parent, mothers, families. Again, no matter what our space, if our employees don't feel that they are supported in some areas, this can have a tremendous impact on their ability to do their work. And so the idea here is that we have policies that promote these things. Civic engagement, encouraging everyone, our employees, to be involved in their communities. Organizational transparency, this is basically a cultural thing within a company. And the idea is that if you're transparent about the organizational structure and your methods, that creates buy-in with employees. Accessible and universal design, this is ADA, this is essentially removing barriers for folks of all different abilities wheelchair or else to be able to use spaces. And emergency preparedness is this general idea that if we are more prepared for emergencies, then we're more resilient. Now, one thing I want to point out is that, we're talking about buildings, but I mentioned a lot of things that aren't really have to do with buildings themselves. And so why am I saying this? Because we could design the best building in the world, the perfect building, we could design it. But if it's not used properly, if it's not cleaned properly, if it's not programmed properly, it doesn't matter. You could have a clean room. Someone walks into a clean room and they're sick and they cough. Doesn't matter how clean that room is. So when we think about buildings and building design, the idea here is that we're thinking about the broader idea of not just the spaces, but also how we're using those spaces and the policies that affect them. So we have another poll here.
Before we get to the poll,
Sure.
so that was kind of a checklist for the WELL certification as far as all the different areas of the building space that you would want to incorporate. How many businesses really take that into account, especially if you have an existing space and you're not necessarily looking to renovate it? How, are businesses trying to incorporate a lot of those things today,
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly some of them have been mandated from the state. So, literally the policies we have in terms of social distancing, cleaning protocol, those types of things. But what it's been doing is that, and frankly, a lot of companies are already doing these to some degree. Obviously we clean our spaces, right? And so while mentioning all these things and putting more attention to it, the idea is that we may take something that we're already doing and just do it better. So for example, maybe cleaning more regularly, or maybe using products that don't off gas or don't have chemicals. So in some cases, it can just be a matter of improving an existing policy. In some cases, it's about implementing new ones.
Okay. All right, well, let's launch our next polling question. And based out of all the things that you heard Eric talk about, what areas, and you can choose more than one, are you looking to improve or would look after this presentation to improve the most about your workspace specifically? And those are, I think, things that we don't really even think about. So you've done a good job kind of organizing all the different tangibles. They're not always well known, or anything you think about like sound, I wouldn't have thought about that. So we'll give it here a moment. There's a lot on the list, so we'll see what people's preferences are. It looks like everybody's getting plenty of water, which is good. But and again, maybe something you don't think about, Yeah.
Start with water. You want to improve your health, drink more water.
Yeah.
Get better sleep.
Well, and then you talked about the smoking, policy 25 feet away, and you're right in the middle of a city. So, right. I'm sure that's hard to.
Not always easy.
All right, so we'll go ahead and share the results. Looks like sound was actually the number one or the highest thing that people probably didn't even think that they could improve, but certainly air, light. I liked what you said about, I didn't even think about this circadian and light, how important it is to your productivity as an employee, I'm sure. And community too, all of them. So you hit it on the head. All right.
All right.
Proceed.
So we can make a difference in our spaces regardless of budget. So I'm going to go through a couple of things and start talking specifically about how this actually translates into buildings. So I have a couple of slides here, and don't worry, there's been a lot of text here, but I promise there's some photos coming. I don't like text either, so I'm just kind of outlining these things, and I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail when I show some photos of our spaces. But these are some overall strategies we can think of for wellness, and these are kind of let's just call them budget, not necessarily considering budget. So the first three here are ones that have been very top of mind in sort of the new COVID considerations: increased ventilation, operable windows, the idea that we flush spaces, we flush the air contaminants out. And at one point, for years, we were designing office buildings with no operable windows, and now we're going back to them. And there's a lot of reasons we did that, by the way. When we have operable windows, it actually makes it more difficult to design the mechanical system sometimes, because the mechanical systems often have to rely upon an assumption of what that space is going to be. So if you have your air conditioner on and you open up a window in the middle of summer, for example, it's going to affect that mechanical system. So these are not necessarily things that are easy to necessarily accomplish, but they're things that we're considering, and they have to be thought of in tandem with the other things we've been relying upon in the system. So enhanced filtration. So this is basically having filters that can take more out of the air than they may currently. UV lights in HVAC systems. These have been around for a while, but they've been gaining a lot more popularity recently. And the idea is that as the air passes through the mechanical system, UV lights can help to kill viruses. Non-porous, easy to clean materials. You may have heard things like antimicrobial surfaces, and actually just having the ability for the material to not absorb chemicals or pathogens and actually be able to be easily cleaned is actually much more useful. Building access solutions, this refers to things in terms of entering buildings. So some of the new systems we've seen, or at least modified systems, are ones where you go up, you actually have to have your temperature taken automatically and answer a poll before the building will actually unlock itself and let you in. Touch-free devices and technology, this can be something that's very high-tech in terms of using computer programs and so forth and sensors, or it can be very low-tech in terms of having a little foot hook on a door. You may have seen these things at the bottom of a door, the kind of little thing that kind of sticks out. The idea that you can open a door with your foot as opposed to using your hands, so that when you, instead of using your hands, you open it, you don't have to use a hand sanitizer immediately thereafter. Natural and artificial light, hugely, hugely important. This is obviously important for wellness, but this is a design strategy for using light has been around since we've had buildings. And generally speaking, better lit spaces tend to increase productivity and happiness and comfort within a space. And a very important one now, exterior spaces. Exterior spaces become incredibly important. So for those of us who like to eat at restaurants during the summer, and we were all very bummed out that we couldn't go to them, the fact that we could eat out on the street, right, was a great thing. And so now we're seeing a lot more interest in designing exterior spaces into our buildings as a way of people getting outside, because it's a safer outside. The idea that there's better airflow and so forth just creates a better space. And by the way, if you tried to actually buy like an exterior heater, like a propane heater or something for your space, you're probably having a hard time doing it because they've been getting snatched up because everyone's trying to prepare for winter and being able to use outside spaces as opposed to relying upon our indoor spaces.
I was gonna say the people in the colder temperature areas, the people on the West Coast, have it good. They have plenty of space outdoors, but
exactly. For those of us in Pittsburgh, some of us are really lamenting the fact that the cold's coming, so we're looking for ways to get out.
Yeah.
So there's also a lot of low-cost strategies too. The first one, enhanced cleaning protocols. Basic, right? Not only does cleaning our spaces help with the health of the spaces, just having, when you walk into a space that is clean or feels clean, it generally feels more comfortable to be in it. And so just doing that alone can increase at least perception, the actual safety of a space and the perception of safety in a space. And when people feel safer in their space, they tend to perform better and they tend to feel more comfortable. Plants and biophilia. Biophilia is a very fancy name for incorporating plant or natural types of forms into a space, either literally or through imagery and so forth. But just actually introducing plants within your space and having that connection to nature has been shown to decrease stress levels. Now I will say with plants, I always say this, if you're gonna bring a plant into your space, take care of it and water it, because a dead plant does not do a very good job of increasing your or helping your mood, I can assure you. So artwork and objects of meaning. Artwork is pretty self-explanatory, but objects of meaning, this is literally the concept that when we have things within our spaces that have meaning to us, then it helps to comfort us. Basic concept, right? One that we probably overlook a lot, but if we're actually more mindful of this, we can actually outfit our spaces with things that provide comfort for us. And so a reference back to Office Space, the red stapler, that was an object of meaning. I have the red stapler myself. Color. There's usually not a whole lot of price difference in one color paint than the other. So the choice of colors within a space can have a very big impact on the way we perceive it. Very bright colors are going to tend to increase alertness and basically increase brain level, whereas cooler colors, warmer colors, neutral ones have a tendency to calm us. So depending on what your bedroom to be like or your bathroom, that's why a lot of times you'll see bedrooms, bathrooms be neutral colors. It's because they tend to be more Policies increase water consumption and promote healthy eating. Promotion here is the idea. So for example, in well, there's a requirement that you have access to water within, I believe it's 75 feet. And so it comes from the idea that if water is easier to get to, people drink more of it. We absolutely saw that in our space. We did this, we saw water consumption increase significantly. And like I said, a very low cost way, a very basic way to increase your health, drink more water. And so if you can promote water drinking within your space, you're actually helping the health of your people by doing it. Very low cost or potentially low cost solution to do it. And also promoting healthy eating when possible. This is not always easy. We used to joke that, in our new space, so when we did our renovations, we had the existing building, which was not certified, and then we have the new space. And I would joke that, all the fruits and vegetables would go into the new space, but whenever the donuts came in, we have to keep them into the old space. So, we can lead a horse to water, we can't force it to drink. So the idea that we're providing, healthier options, or at least talking about the material or the ingredient content of the foods that we do have, create mindful awareness of what we're putting into our bodies. Visual physical access to the exterior, I mentioned this before. So it may not be that you can actually create windows, but just being able to allow people to go outside and promote them going outside on a regular basis, again, helps to increase circulation and actually gets that access to the outside, which has been shown to help mood. And then finally on here, ergonomic adjustments in furniture. Furniture can be very expensive, but even just adjusting the way you sit in your chair, for example, and affects your posture, or the mouse you use, or the desk you use, can have a big impact on your physical comfort level over time. So Desmone lives well. So now I'm going to go back and talk about what well certification is. So well certification, a lot of people have heard of LEED, and so LEED is a point system that basically looks at how buildings impact the environment. And WELL is a point system that looks at how buildings impact people. So all those things I was talking about before, air, water, nourishment, those actually all come from the WELL version 2.0. And essentially the way it works is that there's points within each of these categories, and you get enough points, and then at certain point thresholds, you are able to achieve certification. So we received gold certification, which means we reach a certain level of points of things that we were doing in this. So the other thing about WELL is that it has a verification process. So it's not just a matter of us going and designing a space. People actually have to come out and physically measure our air quality, measure our water quality, to actually sign off on it before we can actually say that we're certified. So that is a little bit unique. Recertification, we have to have it recertified every 3 years. So there's an accountability aspect to it that we have to do. And that was one of the things Desmone as a company, we're encouraged by it, because it requires us to kind of be accountable to ourselves. I won't get into version 1, version 2. This is just different versions. We had ours certified under version 1, but the current version is version 2. A lot of the same concepts, it's just organized a bit differently. Some of you may have heard of the new health safety rating. This is kind of a subset of the overall WELL building standard, and has directly to do with the way that we maintain and operate our buildings. And if you want more information about this particularly, you can try to reach out to me in email or LinkedIn, or go to wellcertified.com. That's the website of the International Well Building Institute, and it'll have all the information specific to well certification. So I'll talk about our building. So our building, which we refer to as 2 Doughboy, as Laura mentioned, was the first WELL Gold certified building in Western PA. And so what you're looking at here is a diagram of our actual building. So in the center here, where it's going to blow up, this is the second floor. You can imagine it's kind of exploded up. On the right side here is our existing building. And what you're looking at here are these different categories around, and how we achieve these within our space. For example, the light, we incorporated rhythmic circadian design, glare control, and also maximize views to the exterior. If you come into our space, you'll see a lot of big windows. That's intentional. Having adaptable spaces, in other words, spaces can be reused for different things. The celebration of our culture within the space and the policies we have all fall in that category. Comfort, accessible design, acoustic solutions. So we actually have a sound masking system. We have an open work area because of the way that we operate, but we've incorporated sound masking as a way of trying to control sound, or at least mitigate it, and so forth. And nourishment, I mentioned before, so we encouraging hand washing, and our space where we encourage mindful eating. So I'll show you some photos here real quick. So what you're looking at the left here was our existing building with the Doughboy statue. So the reason it's called Doughboy or 2 Doughboy is because of the Doughboy statue that's out front. We're in this old bank building, and then the addition behind. So what you're looking at on the right side here is actually the backside, showing the addition. And
It's
these
so
are some
neat.
shots of inside our space. Sorry?
It's so neat when you drive up, and if you're from Pittsburgh or in the Pittsburgh area, or even if you're not, you drive up the street and it's a triangular kind of building. It was neat before, and now it's even better. But love Architects office space because they always are so mindful about the office space for sure.
And I'll throw this out there in case I forget at the end, but if anyone's in Pittsburgh and wants a tour of the building, I love giving tours of our building. Even through COVID, we're open and I can give it to you. Or if you're in town, just give me a ring and I'd be happy to give you a tour. So what you're looking at here on the right is as you walk into the existing building, we call this our Grand Hall now. It was something we renovated as part of our overall project to create like a big open space. And then on the left side here is actually our new office space. And so the lighting that's in there, the mechanical system, these are all things that were designed according to the WELL certification. Some other shots, so another view of our workspace here on the left. On the right side, what you're looking at there is a transition from our existing building into the new space in our new conference room. A lot of natural light, a lot of obviously purposely and thoughtfully designed artificial light, a lot of windows, a lot of views to the exterior. On the right side is that shot of our cafe that I showed before, which we have in our existing building or the prior building. And on the left side here, what this is this is actually the transition space between our old building and our new building. And we actually had Baron Batch, who's a local artist, come in and do an art installation for us right in the center of the space. And so it's sort of a little bit of whimsy, color to kind of pop, and to really kind of create this transition between the old and new. So it's a situation here where we incorporated artwork and colors and so forth as a way of sort of elevating your sense of the space. This gets into the nuts and bolts and details. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of this, but I'm happy to talk to people about it afterwards. What you're looking at here is a diagram, and you're actually seeing specific sections of the WELL certification. For example, 04 VOC reduction. So the requirement was VOC levels can be 5 times higher indoors from outdoors, and the intent here was to minimize the effects of VOCs in materials in our air quality. So this affected the materials that we chose, so the carpets, even the furniture. Internally generated noise. I mentioned before we have a sound masking system and biophilia. We have literal plants in our office that we maintain. Actually, we rely upon another company coming to maintain them for us because a lot of us would kill them if it was up to us. But we also incorporated the idea of biophilia in terms of patterns, bringing in natural patterns into the space as a way of kind of mimicking or referencing nature. So if you want additional information about Doughboy, you can do a search just search Doughboy Well in Google. It should come up with this link here. It's basically what you're seeing there, that account WELL certified is actually linked to our project profile on the WELL website, which actually talks more specifically about the things we did with respect to that. And then also to learn more about WELL certification in general, just go to wellcertified.com. There'll be a host of information there that'll get into the details. So even just with this thought, and this is a thought that drives all of our work at Desmone, healthy spaces lead to healthy people lead to a healthy world. So we see ourselves as designers by the work that we do as actually leading to a better society through design and thoughtful choices. So thank you. There's my contact information, my email address, like I said, LinkedIn, I can also be reached at. If there's any specific questions that we don't answer here. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. That was very educational. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here, get back. I would encourage everyone, anyone who has particular questions to go ahead and type them into the Q&A or question box within Zoom. I know I have a question, and that is, out of your clients, or is WELL certification industry specific, or has any of your clients adopted WELL since you have, or independent of you? Are businesses considering that?
Yeah, some are. So it really rose primarily from the office market. And so that's kind of where it got its start. But there are actually some pilot programs now that branch out. For example, there's a pilot program for multifamily buildings, so apartment buildings and so forth. They're still in a pilot program, but it's not been rolled out. The idea is that these concepts can be spread through all different building types. But like I said, it started primarily within the office. We at Desmone, we actually do a lot of different things. We do everything from single family, multifamily, office, and so forth. And so what we've realized is that even for those clients that are not going to be doing an office building or going to achieve WELL certification, because WELL certification is intense. It really requires you to know your company and to be very aware of all the policies and be thinking about those types of things. So even for those clients that are not looking to do certification per se, what we want to do is bring the broader idea of wellness to all of our projects, no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing certification or not, but to be thinking about with the choices that you make in terms of the design and operating the spaces and the policies you have, that you have those things that actually promote wellness, whether you're doing well or not. And so a lot of our clients will start to ask about it. They're interested in it. A lot of them will realize based on their situation where they may not want to go, for the full certification. But what we do, like I said, is incorporate these concepts into all of our work so that everyone will at least benefit from the information and the knowledge we've gained from going through and living this ourselves.
And do you see these changes being made in the residential market too? I mean, it doesn't have to be office building, right? I mean, we're spending more time at home, if anything.
Right. Yeah.
Now, are people, when they're building new homes, but even renovating their existing homes, following these same kind of principles, even if it's not WELL certified?
Well, I think, we all have an inherent sense of what makes us comfortable or not. And so we all kind of subconsciously are aware of these things. And so when it comes to the house, actually, a lot of us are probably already doing this, right? Now, there may be some things like, not being aware of the material content of what we're doing, where we as designers can say, all right, look, I know you want to use that really cool, paint thing over there, but it's going to off gas and it may get you, really sick.
Right.
So those are where we can kind of add things. But obviously, being aware of our own spaces is something that we're already kind of inherently familiar with. And so
although I know I'm going to make some changes to my workspace now that I do have a live plant that only requires water every 4 weeks. All right, we do have a question in here, and that is, how have you found the quantitative evaluation of your building as an effect on the eagerness of employees returning to the office?
Yeah, that's been very difficult. So as part of WELL certification, we're actually required to do a poll. The problem is that we received our certification and we started occupying our building right before COVID. And so the state of Pennsylvania essentially has had it shut down since. Even though we're allowing people to come into the office, we're technically under, in the state, a mandatory, it's a mandatory telework policy, where feasible. And so, we actually can't even encourage people to come back. We just allow people to come back. So we've not had the ability to have that qualitative, like the polls done to actually see whether it's been effective. So the idea is that once things get back to, I wouldn't say normal, because I think that we're in a very new normal, but once things become more stabilized and we have enough people to come back in the office, the idea is that we'll actually go through that polling to actually see if there's been a difference between prior to us doing this and then having it since, to see, to actually quantify if the things we're doing are having an effect. We have been able to qualify and actually put numbers to the air quality. So we actually have air quality monitors in this space, and we tracked it in our old space, and then we've been tracking it in our new space, and the difference is significant. The air quality in our new space tends to be significantly higher than it was in our old space, and that's largely due to, I think, our mechanical systems and also our cleaning protocol.
And how many people did you have working in your headquarters office before COVID, and how many do you have now?
We had about 35, and on any given day, we're very flexible because we've had a telework policy for years now. There'll generally be about 8 to 12 or so on a regular basis that are in here. Some folks are just not comfortable coming in, and we acknowledge that, especially those with children who, and the whole school situation. But it's voluntary at this point, so it's usually around 8 to 12. Now, sometimes we'll have meetings in here where we'll have quite a few people within the building. The nice thing is we have the space to be able to spread out. But we are still hosting, for example, when we have clients coming in from out of town.
Yeah, okay. All right, the next question is, how much of LEED certification requirements overlaps with WELL building design?
I would say probably roughly around a third. And so those are the things like the VOC, the materials kind of portions. So there is some overlap, and it's not uncommon for people to look at pursuing both. So I would say roughly a third or so.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any last questions? If you do, please feel free to submit them through the question and answer. And otherwise, we will go ahead and wrap up. All right. So Eric, thank you so much for presenting to this audience. I think it's been, oh, we have one more, of course, but it's been very educational. But before we end, let's answer one more question. Your designers who are teleworking, especially those with kids at home, as you mentioned, do they have any strategies for mitigating things like noise in the new workspace?
In the new workspace, in terms of our actual office?
Yes.
I think sometimes just getting away from the home allows them to come into spaces. And so as part of our ability to have choice, we actually have a lot of choice of spaces. So you can actually work at your desk, but we also have a lot of other working opportunities within our space in terms of the cafe or conference rooms, and also like phone booths where you can actually go and work in those different types of areas.
What about for people who are working from home, as you mentioned, the dog barking or the kids screaming in opportune times?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of suggestions there because it would vary on every single one. Yeah, I would say that's where policy and discussing things with whoever else you're sharing your space with could probably have the most effect.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. If anyone would like to contact Eric directly, I have his email up here as well as phone number and LinkedIn address also. So if you have missed any of our previous COVID sponsored type of webinars, we have 3 that are available on our website that you can register for and just watch right away. And they are available to you as well. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it, your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.